All right, welcome back to the Total Life Fitness Podcast. And today we are here with Lisa Feran. So Lisa has been a coach in the fitness industry for 16 years, is a certified sports nutritionist through the International Society of Sports Nutrition. She has owned custom fitness specialists for 11 years and has coached thousands of clients through the years. Her list of accomplishments with both herself and her athletes is quite impressive. So Lisa has specialized in coaching physique competitors. She's coached 90 competitors to stage and has helped 29 athletes earn their pro cards. Lisa has also coached 47 different athletes who won their class and has coached 8 winners of a pro division. So even though she's just over 5 feet tall herself, she's earned a pro card herself in the OCB, the Organization of Competitive Bodies, in the Bikini division in 2019, and competed as a pro in both the IPE and NGA. So for those who don't know, the OCB is America's largest natural bodybuilding organization. So Lisa also went on to win 2 pro shows that season. What's even more impressive about Lisa earning her pro card is the fact that she's had a very difficult road to get there. So in 2007, Lisa was diagnosed with Hodgkin's lymphoma stage 2B cancer at just 26 years old and did over 10 months of chemo and radiation treatment to recover from it. And we'll get more into that today. But she's truly a fighter and has overcome some big obstacles to get to where she is today, and is a highly sought after coach in the body transformation space. And if you need another testimonial for her, Lisa is actually my coach. She recently helped me train for a photo shoot in June of this year, 2021, depending on when you're listening to this. And I sought her out because she's the best person I know at helping people get absolutely shredded for both the stage and for photo shoots. And just so you know, as someone who's been in the fitness space for 9 years, I know a lot of people. So clearly she knows what she's doing. Lisa, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Lou. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So like I said, Lisa's definitely had quite a journey here in the fitness industry. But first of all, I always like to start from the beginning. So you've obviously accomplished so much, both as a coach and an athlete, to be able to earn your pro card in competing, and have coached so many athletes as well. But a lot of people are just thinking like, holy cow, that sounds so impressive. But obviously there's always a journey to get there as well. So let's just start with, tell us a little bit about your background, maybe a little bit about how you were growing up and how you first got into fitness.
Yeah, so fitness and athletics were very highly put onto my brother and I when we were growing up. My dad was a coach himself. He was a wrestling coach, and he had a lot of regrets in life in how he did not work very hard when he was a kid in athletics and in sports. And so he really, really pushed us to do as good as we can in sports. Now, with that being said, I'm probably the least naturally talented athlete that you've probably ever met in your life. So I did club gymnastics when I was a little kid. I played volleyball in high school, ran track in high school. I was lucky enough to be able to do collegiate gymnastics. So I did 4 years of collegiate gymnastics at a Division III school. And then my 4th year there, I was actually a powerlifter, or my 5th year there, I was actually a powerlifting athlete. So I've always loved sports. I've loved competing. I've never been the most naturally talented person, even though, yes, I did 4 years of college gymnastics. Like, I would say that I had to work very, very hard at it in order to make the team. But yeah, that's a little bit of background and like how I started in athletics.
Awesome. So like you kind of mentioned, so you were a very obviously high level athlete in gymnastics. So not, like you said, not athletic, but you obviously worked very hard to get there. So clearly, like, work ethic for you seems like it was something that was preached at a very early age. Would you say, like, and I know because I've worked with gymnasts before, and I mean, they're literally in high school. I mean, you're probably training 16 hours a week sometimes. Would you say that the work ethic that you have today was kind of developed through gymnastics?
Oh, absolutely. And I'm so glad that I had that experience, and especially like college, right? Because like your schedule, you just have to learn how to be so regimented in your life, because you have to make sure you make it to class like during the day. You have to make it sure you make it to the training room by a certain time. You have to you're at practice for like 3 to 5 hours a day, depending on the day. You have to somehow find time to study, and then your social life. And so like, now that I think back about it, like that probably really shaped who I am today in just like the consistency in a schedule and like the work ethic that I have.
Absolutely. So that, like I said, that's really cool that you did that. So you said you were doing gymnastics for 4 years in college. Then all of a sudden you got the powerlifting. So how did you first get into fitness and lifting?
Yeah. Well, I always loved lifting. We always had like a summer strength and conditioning program when I was in high school, although like it was not very structured, I would say. I would say there was a lot to learn yet. Um, then when I was in gymnastics for those 4 years in college, there was always the club powerlifting team at school. And every year they would be like, Lisa, like you have to do powerlifting. Like you're going to be so great at it. Like you have like a very natural ability to like lift. And at that time, it just didn't make sense, right? They're very, very opposing sports. Gymnastics is obviously like extremely quick twitch. And so I was like, it just doesn't make sense. I can't train for both. So then my 5th year, and this is back, like, this is way back in like 2004 when women, like, it wasn't cool yet for women to lift weights, you know? And so my 5th year, I ended up joining the powerlifting team. And I think there was one other girl on the team, and it was a bunch of guys. And I loved it. I loved the feeling of being extremely strong. um, I loved trying to break new records for myself personally. And so one of the coaches was actually in grad school at the time, and he got me to compete. I competed in about 3 meets. I qualified for nationals like my first year. But then my coach, what happened was my coach ended up taking a job and he left school. And so I didn't have a coach anymore. And so unfortunately, like I didn't really continue down that path at that time in my life, but it was a really great experience for me. And I'm so glad that I did it.
Wow. So like you said, I mean, you typically would maybe the outside person look at someone like you, like you said, I mean, maybe on the shorter side, like not, huge and ripped and buff and something like that. Especially like you mentioned, I think with females, lifting is becoming more popular now, but maybe wasn't even as much, 15 or so years ago. So I mean, were there a lot of people who were kind of like, what were you doing, or why are you competing in this? Like, should there be other things you're doing? Like, did you get a lot of that as well?
Yeah, for sure. And I think like at that time, like all my friends thought it was weird, like just women lifting back then was not a thing. This is back before even, think about it, like Facebook back in 2004, 2005 was not even a thing yet. Instagram was not a thing yet. So like this was way before, this kind of like women empowerment where it's cool to be strong and cool to have muscle, um and cool to lift weights with women. That was not a thing like back in 2004, 2005. So a lot of my friends did think it was really weird to kind of get into that for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm sure, like you said, not everyone thought it was as cool as you did at the time, but that's really cool that obviously you got into powerlifting, you started competing. So then how do you transition from you're a power lifter, you're a college gymnast, to now you're a fitness coach? Like, how did you make that transition?
Yeah. So what happened is I ended up moving here to Madison, where you and I are both from, and I started working part-time at a gym. And when I was working part-time at this gym, I met a girl named Shauna, and Shauna had been competing in fitness competitions for years. So when I say fitness, fitness is a part of the bodybuilding world that doesn't really exist anymore. So some of you might remember, if you're old enough, fitness is basically like a routine to music. It has a lot of gymnastics components in it. It has strength components in it. And it's kind of done like with a little bit of like a dance routine. So fitness competitions at the time were run with bodybuilding competitions. So Shauna was like, hey, like, I think you would be really good at this. You should go travel around and do some of these shows with me. And so that's how I got introduced really to the bodybuilding world, was through the sport of fitness. Now, I only did fitness for probably like a few shows. And then I got to learn about this other component of the sport of bodybuilding, right? So back then there was bodybuilding. I think there was men's physique back there, and then there was figure. Okay. So back then there wasn't even the category of bikini yet. But I was like, hey, I think I want to try this other part of the sport out. So then I ended up doing and enrolling in a few figure competitions too.
Awesome. So like you said, kind of you met a mentor who brought you into the sport, and hey, you as someone who has a gymnastics background, you're like, okay, cool. Now I can do both gymnastics and lifting and kind of combine your passions into one. So then from there you started competing in figure. So how did it go when you first, or not in figure, in fitness? So how did it go when you first started competing?
So fitness, was okay. I don't think that that was really my thing. I think there is a lot of, how do I explain this? There is a lot of like attitude in the fitness routine, and that wasn't my personality. You know what I mean? But I really enjoyed figure. Um, that first year, I think I placed second probably in one of my first shows. And so from there, I was just kind of hooked. I loved the discipline of it. I loved the dieting. I loved the workout part of it. Um, Back then, here in Madison, there was only like a very small handful of us that were really competing in the sport, right? And so that's kind of how my coaching business started to grow. I was certified to do nutrition. I have an exercise science degree with a teaching degree on top of that. And at the beginning, I never sought out to be a coach. People would just come up to me and they would be like, hey, I know you do this thing. Like, what are you doing to get ready? And so at the beginning, like, it was me just like being like, this is the knowledge that I have at this time. Like, I'm going to try to help you the best I can. Back then in certifications, there wasn't a lot of application, right? So they didn't teach you how to coach back then. So back then I was just helping people how I knew how and how people had helped me in the past. And then the next thing you know, it's like you're helping one person, you're helping another person, you're helping another person. The next person starts calling you coach. And then the next thing you know, 10 years later, I have a massive team.
Go. That pretty crazy how that happens. And I found with a lot of people who have had the longevity, especially in the fitness career, a lot of times it really does start as just passion like that. And it certainly did for me as well, right? It's just like you're passionate about it. People start asking you questions, and then all of a sudden, before you know it, you become a coach too. So it's really cool, obviously, that you got into coaching. So, kind of as we alluded to earlier, you were competing for a while, and then, obviously a very unfortunate event happened for you. As we kind of mentioned, when you're 26 years old, you were diagnosed with cancer. So, I'm sure that was a complete shock and surprise to you at that time. Obviously, you don't hear about that too often. Someone in their mid 20s having a terrible event like that happening to them. But could you just kind of go over your story of how that happened?
Yeah, so it was kind of crazy, right? Because that was when I was still very, very new in the fitness industry. And I was actually at that time, I was prepping for one of those fitness competitions. My friend Shauna, who I had mentioned, and I had gone out to Los Angeles. It was around November, the very end of the year, right before the holidays. We did this fitness competition, and I had pretty much like every symptom possible of this Hodgkin's lymphoma. Like, I had a really bad cough. I was extremely fatigued. I had night sweats, but I didn't know like night sweats were a thing. I just thought I was sweating at night.
Sure.
Um, but a lot of those things I just thought were because I'm training really hard. I'm dieting, maybe I just don't feel that great because I'm training for this show, right? Um, so come to find out, like, Thanksgiving was about 3 days later. And during Thanksgiving, all of a sudden I had extreme lymph node swelling in my neck. And so, right away I was like, well, this doesn't look normal. I should probably go get it checked out. The first time I went in, my doctor was kind of like, well, you might just be getting sick. It could just be your glands being swollen. I messaged them like a week later and they're like, we better, send you to see a specialist. They send me to see a specialist. That doctor took one look at me and he literally just said, you have cancer, I can tell. Which is crazy because at the time I hadn't even had any scans or anything like that. And then from there, things progressed very rapidly. They got me into have a scan. They could see that they think my cancer was probably growing for over 2 years already by the amount that I had in my chest. They said I had over 30 cluster tumors. My left lung was partially collapsed already, and it was like wrapped all the way around my heart. And so they were like, we need to start chemo with you pretty much immediately. So within like a few weeks, like met with an oncologist and started chemotherapy.
Holy cow. I mean, that's, you typically think of, and I think this is partially maybe a myth somewhat of the bodybuilding space too. You think like, oh, you're eating healthy, you're training, you're competing. I mean, so obviously you're 26 years old at this part. Like when you hear that diagnosis from the doctor, like what goes through your mind? I mean, how'd you deal with that?
Yeah. So for me, I know like a lot of people automatically go to fear, right? And like for me, the whole entire time that I was like going through treatment, I was just, I had the mindset of this is what I need to do right now in my life to get through this. Like there was never like this question of like, I'm not going to make it through this. It was just like, okay, this is going to suck. I have to do chemo. It's not fun. My hair fell out, all the things. You have to go in there every other week, like hooked up for a tube, like all day long. But like for me, I was like, as hard as this is, like I just know like this is what I have to do right now in my life. And then when I'm done with it, I'm gonna be done with it. And so that's kind of how it went. Like, and there were bumps in the road in the way. Like originally I was only supposed to do 6 months of chemo. And then they were like, okay, now we have to do 8 months of chemo. And so they had to extend that. And so it was tough. It was a really hard journey, but I think for sure, like I just look back on that and I'm like, man, like that was tough, but I knew I was going to make it through it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that was just crazy, and it's obviously, I'm sure, gives you a completely different outlook. I mean, how would you say like when you went through that? So kind of as we mentioned before, so you went through chemo and radiation treatment, and as you told me previously, you've been cancer free since, which is obviously really good to hear. So how would you say that experience kind of shaped things for you or changed your outlook?
Yeah. I mean, you just have to kind of go through life with a lot of gratitude, right? Um, I'm very grateful that I have the life that I have, the family that I have. But also that I am able to like lead and inspire people on a daily basis and help people get to them their best selves also. And so like I just want to live like each day being the best version of myself that I possibly can and help as many people as I possibly can.
Hmm. You kind of use that, right, as obviously like you said, it gives you a different perspective to want to help and serve others. So that's really, obviously great that it did have an impact on you in a positive way in the end. Obviously that was very unfortunate what happened in the scheme of things, that you were able to have that positive outlook on it though afterwards. So I mean, once you did go through that, so I mean, what happened next for you?
Yeah. So I think for me, like fitness was really huge through that whole process. I was still doing like 30-minute workouts, if not a little bit longer, almost every day. My oncologist was very, very good with working with me on that. And he actually wanted me to continue to work out. I also continued to eat like really healthy. And I always kind of like through that whole journey, even though I was like going through chemotherapy and radiation, like I kind of had my sights set on like doing a competition like a full year from that. And so I did. I got up on stage and I had to wear a full wig, like because I was completely bald. And so I competed like a year later. Now, was I in the best condition that I possibly could have been at? probably not. But I think I actually won a show that season, which is kind of crazy to think back about. But yeah, I think fitness for me, it was something like competing for me at that time was so fun that it gave me something to like look forward to.
So, wow, I mean, that's pretty incredible that you were able to still fight through and compete after that. So, did anyone or any doctors like suggest that competing may have been negatively contributing to that or have hesitations about you going back to competing or anything like that?
No, my oncologist was like so amazing. Like he knew my history and he really knew me. There was like at one point I remember going in and he was like, "How you doing?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm doing okay. Like I haven't worked out as much lately." And he was just like, "Well, why not? Like, why aren't you working out as much?" Because he knew like for me mentally that was so huge, and he didn't see anything wrong with it or anything that would affect me in a negative way, which is really funny because then when I went on to radiation, my doctor was like, "You're working out? What are you doing still working out? Like, you shouldn't be working out." And like for me, like working out was huge, like the whole time through. And so like my radiation doctor and I like kind of butted heads a little bit more because he was more on the like, whoa, you need to slow down. Whereas my oncologist was really actually promoting it and he wanted me to continue those like same patterns.
Yeah, I'm sure different people had different opinions, but clearly you were determined to get through that and continue competing. And that's really great. It seems like it obviously fueled you through the whole thing and you kind of use fitness as that thing that you really look forward to and enjoyed. So take us through so at this point, had you already been coaching people? You had already been coaching other competitors, correct?
Yeah. And at that point, I think it was like a handful of people, like here or there. I probably would pick up like 5, 6 clients. It's nothing like it is now.
Sure. And for frame of reference, so in 2016, I did my first men's physique show, first and only at this point. And I had already had another coach. So I didn't know about Lisa yet. Had I known about Lisa, I had a great coach in case he's listening to this too. But had I known about Lisa, I probably would have had her help me as well. So I sought her out for posing because I knew of someone else who had used her for posing. And the first competition that I went to with her, there were like these different competitors at this national competition, and every other competitor, like there would be like one coach per competitor, and then Lisa is over here and she has a team of like 15 athletes competing, and no other coach there has more than like one or two athletes. So I mean, clearly like Lisa has become like a go-to in the industry. So how do you go from like just kind of you're a competitor yourself, some people start asking about competing, to now you are one of the go-tos for physique competition in our industry?
Yeah. Well, first thing you have to invest in yourself, right? So I always say like you have to have great coaches yourself and great mentorship. The other thing is you have to get educated, right? Like you have to know like the ins and outs of the industry. So when I say the ins and outs of the industry, like what a lot of people don't realize is it's not only nutrition and training, but like the industry changes every year in what they're looking for. So you have to constantly be up on like, what is the look for bikini this year? What is the suit style for bikini? What are people doing for tanning? What is the look for men's physique this year? What is the look for bodybuilding? Are they going with an extremely lean, um, extremely hard look? Or are they looking for more size? You know what I mean? So you just have to know the ins and outs of the industry. And I think one advantage of being at shows, for probably at least a quarter of the weekends out of the year, is that like I know the industry really well, on top of having that history of like the nutrition coaching and also the exercise science background. So yeah, just like anything, it started small and then, referral after referral, and my clients just kept crushing it. Um, and that's how it built to what it is today, just taking on a few more clients every season. Typically here in the Midwest, most people compete in the spring and fall. And so you just take on like more and more clients, and my athletes just kept crushing it, and it just kind of grew from there.
Love it, love it. So, like you said, investing in yourself through the years. I mean, clearly being obsessed with the sport, right? I mean, clearly you know the ins and outs. You're constantly monitoring and watching. And for those who are listening, there, she said, what is it, a quarter of the weekends of the year she's at competitions. I mean, clearly, eats, sleeps, and breathes this stuff. So, for you, what are some of like your favorite memories, like working with athletes, or like things that have really like kept you inspired through the years?
Well, it never gets old, Luke. I think like every time I'm at a show, like this last weekend, for example, we just earned 2 new pro cards. I think that is like one of the things that like gives me like the biggest warm fuzzies is like just seeing these athletes like put in the work and then accomplish their goal. And that's a lot of, these natural athletes, that's their goal, right? Is to earn their pro card. Um, and so it's just so cool to sit in the crowd as a coach, just watching that. And I've, luckily been able to see that 29 times. I've had 29 different athletes earn their pro card. And so I tell you, it never gets old. Like year after year, it just like, it still makes you so happy sitting in the crowd, just seeing your client like earn that title is so awesome.
I love that too. I mean, clearly you get a lot out of coaching people as well. And another question I have too for you is, typically when you see a trainer, like, you think of like, someone in their 20s, maybe fresh out of college, they're at your local, YMCA or something like that for a couple of years. And they're just kind of doing it to pass the time until they kind of find their other profession, right? So for the longevity for trainers, especially, or fitness coaches, is very short. Yet you've been able to maintain so far at least a 16-year career in this industry. So what would you attribute that to?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think, at this point, I'd say is like I have an amazing team behind me because I not only have my coaching business, but I also have a studio. So like right now, you know, I let most of my team and my staff run the training at the studio so that I can put my time at where kind of I shine. You know what I mean? Like not everyone wants to be or can be a contest prep coach. And so we know that my time is value most doing that in my business right now, right? So I think that's part of it is you have to have a support team that is there to do the things that you can't do because I can't do all the things right now, right? And so I definitely need people to help me. And that's one thing I'm actually working on right now in my business is like, I still need to let loose a little bit because I still sometimes think that I do a little bit too much in my business. And so, just delegating a little bit more to the awesome, amazing team that I have right now.
Yeah, and totally delegation can definitely be tough, but obviously, you've been through this for a while. So now kind of bringing it back to your career. So you earned your pro card in 2019. I think at that point you'd already coached, I think, at like 20 other people, you said, to their pro cards or something like that. So, you kind of started competing. So take us through your journey of how you were able to personally earn your pro card. And I know you had some failures or setbacks along the way. You kind of kept going on, and really being driven to achieve that. So take us through that journey of how you achieved your pro card.
Yeah. So, like I said, started competing in 2006, right? And I had won probably 3 shows, but I had never won an overall title. So anybody that doesn't know the sport of natural bodybuilding, you not only have to win your class to earn your pro card, but you have to win the overall title. So usually there's like a short, a medium, and a tall class. And then you have to go up against the other height class winners or the other weight class winners, and you have to win the overall title in order to earn your pro card. So I was very close a few times, but I had never like quite snagged that overall title. So going into 2019, or the year prior to 2019, I knew I was going to enlist somebody that I think was really going to help take me to the next level. And so I had gone to the Physique Summit, I think that was in 2017. And I had heard Cliff Wilson speak on stage, and I knew like he was going to be my guy, you know, like when I heard him speak, I was like, man, like so much of what he's saying is like resonating with me. And I knew like I wasn't going to be able to do it myself. I had coaches in the past. I had also coached myself in the past, but I knew that I need somebody to be accountable to. Now, accountability for me is probably different than most people, because most people, you know, really struggle with the diet part. For me personally, my struggles were going to be to not eat enough, you know what I mean, or to do the cutting phase. My struggle was going to be to take the time throughout the day to eat enough to grow in order to get the physique that I really wanted before we went into a cut. So my coach and I actually worked together for over a full year before we even went into a cutting phase, and I had to eat at a caloric surplus for over a year. I right now I'm 5'1". I only weigh about 109 pounds. And so like I have a very ectomorphic frame. It's very hard for me to put on muscle, especially since I've been lifting for so long. And so, you know, we just really went to work, and I was consistent, and I wasn't just consistent for like 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. I was consistent for about a year and a half, in order to be able to earn my pro card. So I was definitely like in the best shape of my life that year. I was definitely the leanest I ever stepped on stage, with also the most muscle that I ever had. And so, yeah, it was a really great season. I finally was able to earn that pro card after 13 years. Most people, it does not take them 13 years to earn their pro card. And then I went on to actually compete in 3 pro shows that season, and I actually won 2 out of the 3 pro shows that season. So yeah, it's kind of crazy. Like I actually coached 20 athletes that earned their pro card before I earned my pro card myself, which is actually really cool if you think about it, that like I have that many people like trusting in me, even though even though I hadn't checked that box off my list of accomplishments yet, that I had all those people like really trust in me and believe in me. So I always like look back on that and think like how cool that is.
Yeah, that's really cool. I mean, the fact that right, you've been coaching others, you coached others to their pro card, you hadn't really earned it yourself. I mean, throughout that time, I mean, obviously, I'm sure you were trying for a while. And for those who don't know, I mean, for those who have never done a physique or figure competition or anything like that, I mean, you are sacrificing a lot. I mean, it's literally like you follow your diet to a T. I mean, your training regimen is really on point, like your sleep, your water intake, like everything is like really on point. So it is a very difficult thing to do. So how were you able to still stay motivated and driven that whole time? Like all through those 13 years?
You know, like you know, for me, it was just always like keeping my eye on the prize. And like for me, it was always so hard, like knowing that I had the potential to do it and knowing that I was going to make a run for it again someday, right? Like it's awesome to be able to coach that many athletes, but then part of you is always like, well, I want that to be me too. You know, like I want to be able to accomplish that someday too. I want that to be me, you know, earning that pro card and being able to compete as a pro. And so like being at shows every weekend, I think not every weekend, but you know what I mean? Like almost every weekend, you're always in that environment. And I just knew that that was always a huge goal of mine that I wanted to accomplish. And I had been so close so many times that I was basically going to do whatever I needed to do in order to make it happen that last round. And so, you know, luckily I had great mentorship and a great coach, and everything went like super smooth for sure.
Love it. So after all that time and you did earn your pro card, how did you feel once you won your pro card? What was the feeling?
Oh, it was so awesome. And I had like, so when I earned my pro card, it was actually out in Nashville, and I had a whole squad of people that came to cheer me on. And so like, it was just like, kind of like, for me, it was like finally, like I finally did it. Like all those years of hard work finally paid off. And so it was just like the best feeling. And then, going on to compete the rest of this season and like just crushing it and like winning more pro shows was just like the icing on the cake. And it was just like, I almost felt, Luke, like finally like validated, even though I had like a ton of success as a coach, like I finally felt validated as a competitor too. Like I feel like people who have been around a long time like had respect for me as a coach, but I also feel like I was finally earning that respect, not only as a coach, but also as a competitor.
Yes, I'm sure, like you said, it felt so validating, especially, to have all those people cheering you on and in your corner and all the work that you put in. So that's really great. So what's next for you in competing?
Yeah, people ask me that all the time. I get asked that probably almost on a daily basis. And right now, I my focus is 100% on my business. So people ask all the time, are you retired? Are you not retired? I can't say that I'm like retired yet. Never say never. I think I'm going to come back and I'm going to make a run for it one more time, probably at a Masters World Championship. I turned 40 this year, so I'll qualify for the Masters division as of this year. And so never say never. I'll probably make a comeback. But right now, my focus is my business. And I think, maybe when I get some things in place and I feel like I can train the way that I need to train, you never know. Never say never.
There you go. Don't call it a comeback. Love it. All right. So now a question that I know you get asked often as well. And some people, have maybe thought about competing in a competition before. Maybe a lot of you listening to this, maybe you have no desire ever do that, or maybe you're just kind of curious, like what would it even be like to do a figure competition or physique competition? So for someone who's kind of like just curious, like what would you say to that person?
Yeah. So what I do is most of my clients are local. So I set up a consult either online or in person, and we assess where your current body composition is, right? I'm going to try to direct you in the direction of what class that I think your body is going to fit best in. And then from there, we have to start thinking about a timeline. Now, the biggest mistake most people make is they think that they're going to be able to do a bodybuilding show on a very short timeline. And that's probably not going to be the case, right? So the first thing we have to look at is, do you have enough muscle mass, or do we need to put you through first a building phase in order to put on a little bit of muscle mass? Secondly, have you been dieting already? Because if you've been chronically dieting, you are probably not set up for success to go into a cutting phase for a bodybuilding competition, right? So we might have to do a little bit of reverse dieting, a little bit of metabolic adaptation where we build your calories back up before we go into a cutting phase. Um, there is a chance that you might come in and talk to me and you might have plenty of muscle mass. You're set up for success. You haven't been like dieting in any time in the past recently. And if that's the case, if I think you're set up for success, that you could potentially start dieting for a show, we look at like, how long is that going to take us, right? I think I did this with you too, Luke. Like, okay, like if our goal is to get to around 3% body fat and you're at this percent body fat, a good rate of fat loss is that you're going to maintain your muscle is about half a body fat percent a week, 2% body fat a month, right? So if you're a female competitor and you want to come in like 9% body fat and you're at 25% body fat, well, that's going to take us a while. That's not going to just take us like 12 weeks. I think like there's a misconception that like, oh, I want to do the show. It's only going to take me 12 weeks to get there. And that's not the case at all. We're going to do a very slow cut so that you can maintain your muscle in order to get you into the show with your best look for sure. So, there's a lot of factors that go into it along with lifestyle. Like, is your lifestyle something right now that you can put in the time and the effort to train and to be consistent with your diet in order to do this right now too. So we talk a lot about like home life, lifestyle factors, and just make sure that it's a good life's timing. Honestly, Luke, I probably spend more time now talking people out of competing than into competing. And I tell them to wait until it's like a good time in life for them.
A lot of really good stuff there. Like you said, I mean, I can, one thing I can tell is you're always just honest with people. And I think that a lot of people, I mean, most people, I mean, obviously, I've been a coach for a while now too. And, just from people, it's generally they come into a program wanting to, I'm going to lose 40 pounds in the next 12 weeks and then I'll be good. Or, hey, I know I just need another 6 weeks. So I just, I'll do this really quick. Like, where do you think that mindset comes from, and how do you, of people who just want everything right now, and how do you kind of reverse people's thought process on, like, you're going to need some time to actually be able to lose weight, especially when we're in an instant gratification society where everyone wants everything right now and thinks that things are just going to come super easily and right away.
Right. Well, you just hit the nail on the head, right? Like there's all these fad diets out there right now where people, want the quick fixes. And some people have gotten the quick fixes in the past. And that's basically a lot of my job right now is fixing the people that did all of these fad diets in the past where they have had metabolic adaptation or their metabolism is broken now because they've done too many fad diets in the past, right? And so the biggest thing that I do with clients is I give them realistic expectations and I don't budge on it. Right. And so, like, if somebody comes in and they're like, you know, have this like crazy goal that's like just so unrealistic, the number one thing I do is I say like, no, this is an appropriate amount of fat loss for you in this amount of time. And so each client that I work with, we actually sit down and we go through that process with them and what their journey is going to look like. And so they're set up for success from the beginning, right? And if they don't like what I have to say, and if they think that they want to try to lose weight faster, well, then we're probably not going to be a very good fit. And you can go find somebody that's going to take your money and lie to you, right? But what I like to do is I like to just like set people up with realistic expectations and then over deliver, right? And so if you can get people like thinking realistically about like what a good timeline for them and what a good rate of fat loss is, and not only get them to their end goal, but also reverse diet them out of their cutting phase so they're set up for success for life, then you're doing right by those clients, right? We're not doing right by our clients if we lie to them and we give them unrealistic expectations of what they can achieve if it's not achievable.
Yes, I love that. Amen. Right. Because I think that you nailed it on the head. As a coach, it's definitely important to set the expectations for your client. And like you said, for other people, it's, probably the majority of the people listening to this aren't coaches, but people who just want to understand, okay, what are realistic expectations? I think you just laid it out there that, it's probably going to go a little bit slower than we think, but as we always say, it didn't take you 3 months to get to where you are. It's probably going to not take you 3 months to get to where you want to go. So love this, and this has been great and everything that you've talked about so far. So one of the questions that I always like to, before we get into the last question, I want to give you a second to let people, they've listened to you, they're probably like, oh, I want to follow her, I want to find out more about Lisa. So what's the best way for someone to follow you or get in touch with you?
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram at Lisa underscore Feran, or you can find me on Facebook uh, as Lisa Feran. And then you can also follow my business if you want. It's at Custom Fitness Specialist. I have a studio here in the Madison area, along with coaching. So
There you go. And like I said, I'm a testimony of hers as well. She does really good work. So last question I always like to leave people with is, this is called the Total Life Fitness Podcast because we believe that, fitness is about more than just fitness, right? It kind of sets the tone for every area of your life. So what I'm going to leave you with this question, like, what does fitness mean to you in your life?
what does fitness mean to me in my life? Oh, Luke, that's such a good question. I think for me, it's just like feeling not only good about yourself physically, but also mentally too, right? And like bringing the best version of yourself every day, you have to have some level of physical fitness, right? And so my goal, with my clients always is not only that they feel really great about themselves, like in a physical manner, but they also feel really great about themselves mentally and like how they view themselves too. So, yeah, I think that's what I got for you.
Good stuff. Appreciate your time today.
Oh, thanks so much, Luke.